So I recently started replaying one of my favorite real-time strategies, Stronghold Crusader, and I thought to myself, what if I was a medieval lord? So I decided to make a video about it. Also remember, don't let this video be your only source of information about the topic. I may forget to mention something or make a mistake somewhere. So if I miss something, feel free to correct me in the comments. Enjoy. So, what is a medieval lord exactly? In the feudal system, a lord was part of the noble class, essentially someone who had land and a title given to him by the king. With that land came responsibilities. Suddenly you had villagers to keep happy, in the medieval sense, taxes to levy, politics to navigate, militias to raise, and endless tasks to handle. Now let's talk about you. How do you become a lord? Well, there are a couple of ways. The easiest is to be born a lord. If your father was a lord and wasn't overthrown or killed, you inherit his title as his successor. A slightly harder way is to become a knight. You'd have to excel in combat and swordsmanship and participate in many wars or disputes. If you were lucky enough not to die in battle and managed to impress the king with your loyalty and skill, he might grant you land and the title of lord. A less deadly way is to marry a noblewoman. If she has no male relatives, or you ensure there are none left, and you play your cards right, she could grant you control over her lands. However, this typically required you to come from a noble family, as most marriages were arranged. On rare occasions, if you were a wealthy individual, perhaps a merchant, and the king needed money for a war, he might sell lands. Once you became a lord, along with land and riches came endless tasks and responsibilities. Let's look at some of them. The most obvious is governance. You would be responsible for the prosperity of your lands and estate. This included managing agriculture and taxes, overseeing trade, and ensuring good relations with other lords. You'd also serve as a judge, resolving disputes brought to you by villagers, often in your favor. Corruption was another issue you'd face, often as a temptation. Many lords were corrupt when appointing local sheriffs and officials. Speaking of appointments, you'd also need to worry about the defense of your village. Foreign invaders, rival lords, and bandits would all pose threats. Setting up a militia would be crucial for maintaining power. Additionally, you'd need to support your king with taxes and military aid. Refusing would result in losing your title, as loyalty to the king was paramount. You'd also have to comply with the authority of the church. No village was complete without a church, and as a noble, you'd need to maintain close ties with it. You'd participate in ceremonies and weddings and often host them in your manor or castle. The size of your manor would reflect your power. If you had close ties to the king, it would be larger and more luxurious. If not, well. Now, let's imagine what a typical day as a medieval lord might look like. You'd wake up at dawn to hear mass or pray. Afterward, you'd have breakfast, typically bread, cheese, and ale. Then you'd handle state matters like taxes, rents, supplies, and harvest reports. Around midday, villagers would come to you with disputes. As a judge, you'd resolve them. Corruption was common, and many lords favored those who offered bribes, but you'd need to be careful. Too much corruption could turn people against you. In the afternoon, you'd meet with advisors to review finances and discuss defense plans. If times were peaceful, you might lead a hunting party or practice fencing to stay in shape and command respect. In the evening, you'd say your prayers before dining with your family, knights, and advisors, often discussing politics. If that got boring, you could call for entertainment. Music, acrobatics, jesters, you name it. Finally, when you were ready for bed, everyone else would follow suit. That's your day. Even though being a lord sounds nice, it came with burdens. In hard times, when taxes were high, people might rebel against you. History is full of examples of lords being taken to court by their villagers, though they rarely won. One thing to clarify, there's a common perception of lords as exploitative, corrupt, and evil. While that was sometimes true, these cases stood out because they were extreme. Most lords were relatively fair by medieval standards. For the average peasant, corruption and hardship were part of life. In times of violence, raiders, and bandits, peasants appreciated the work and shelter a lord provided in exchange for protection. Many even preferred a strict lord who ruled with a firm hand, as it brought stability. Fear of harsh punishment often deterred theft and crime. Adding to the complexity of our view of the medieval ages, it's worth noting that during the Renaissance, intellectuals painted the Middle Ages as barbaric to undermine the feudal system. This intensified during the Reformation, focusing on criticizing the Catholic Church. These narratives shaped how we view the Middle Ages today: brutal, stagnant, and barbaric. This perspective often ignores the rich cultural, scientific, and social advancements of the era, such as Gothic architecture, universities, and agricultural innovations. So, yes, the medieval era was rough, but not as bad as we often believe. As a medieval lord, your role was far more complex than that of a mere tyrant or savior. While history remembers the worst of your title, your legacy would lie in balancing firm rule with compassion. So, my lord, how will you rule in the face of such expectations and legacies?